Hey everyone, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name is Carolina Rossini. I am a professor of practice at School of Public Policy and director for programs at the Public Interest Technology Initiative. So it's my honor to welcome you and welcome our dean for the School of SBS, Social Behavior Sciences, Carl Rettenmeier, to do the opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's still not working.
Yeah, I'm upstairs then. Supposedly like the computer is...
So, good morning, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. Artificial intelligence is no longer an abstraction. It's actively shaping how we teach, conduct research, work, live, do homework, all sorts of things. This is why we are proud to host the AI and Us Rethinking Research, Work, and Society as a year-long interdisciplinary series led by the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences. This effort brings together partners from across the university, including the College of Humanities and Fine Arts, the College of Education, the Merit College of Nursing, the Commonwealth Honors College, the College of Natural Sciences, the Graduate School, the Manning College of Information and Computer Science, the Riccio College of Engineering, the Center for Teaching and Learning, CSSI, DAX, and the UMass Office of Equity and Inclusion. At SPS, we are committed to ensuring that our students are not only prepared to use AI, but to question it, shape it, and lead with ethical responsibility and with creativity. The series is not just a set of conversations, that it will also help to directly inform the SPS strategic plan, helping us to integrate AI into our teaching, research, and community engagement in thoughtful and lasting ways. Students, faculty, alumni, and community members all have a role to play in shaping how AI is developed and used in the public interest. Over the course of the year, we're going to be exploring 4 core themes, and have been since September: teaching and learning with AI, AI and social science research, the future of work, and the broader societal impacts of AI, including democracy, equity, and security. And that theme will continue into our new SBS Project on Democracy that we are bringing up to speed right now. Through keynotes, faculty talks, workshops, and interactive sessions, we aim to create a space for both critical reflection and practical engagement. Today's keynote brings us directly into one of the most urgent dimensions of this conversation. We are honored to welcome Nicholas Butts, Director of AI and Cybersecurity Policy at Microsoft. Nicholas leads global efforts to address the adversarial use of AI, strengthening cybersecurity defenses, and secure AI systems, models, data, and infrastructure. His work sits at the intersection of technology, security, and geopolitics, a space that is becoming increasingly central as nations and companies navigate what many are calling a new technological Cold War. In his talk, Weapons and Shield, AI in the Age of Tech and Conflict, Nicholas will explore how AI is being used both offensively and defensively, and what this means for global security, innovation, and the future of digital infrastructure. This is a conversation that goes well beyond technology. It touches on governance, economic competition, and the stability of global systems. So we hope today's session will be engaging and interactive in the second half of our time here. Please feel free to submit your questions as the talk progresses, and we will leave time for discussion at the end, which will be moderated by Carolina Rossini, who I also have to thank for being the moderator, not only of this, but the overall leadership for our AI and Us series. So please join me in welcoming Nicholas Butts.
Can everyone hear me? Good. We made a slight change to the title because when I was on the train here up from New York, I was reflecting a little bit on AI's role. So I hope you'll forgive me for the change. But I'm going to talk to you today about 3 things. As a former public policy student myself, encourage you. I know everyone has lots of stuff going on, but if you'll indulge me for the next 30 minutes, we're going to record the session. Don't worry about taking notes. I would much rather get your questions, shut down your laptops, at my team at Microsoft, when we have meetings, we have a no laptop policy so that we make sure that we're engaged. So to the extent that you can, help me with that and bring some interesting questions. So 3 things I'll talk to you about today. First is this idea of tech Cold War. Is there a tech Cold War? What's driving a tech Cold War? What does it look like? Second is, what does that mean for AI? And then thirdly, what does that mean for you all? And I promise you at the end, we'll have some time to answer questions like, okay, that's great, how do I get a job? So the analytical frame that I will use for today's talk and that we use in our book is this threefold argument. The first argument is that the IT stack, the information technology stack, the technology stack that makes up what we know today of technology, what you guys are using for your phones, for your laptops, for your IoT devices, for your smart devices at home, for some of you, for your cars, it's splitting in 2. That's not what it was designed for. It was designed to be global. Technology was supposed to flow where the effort was the least. It was supposed to benefit everyone. Do you remember when we had the release of the first social media platforms? They were going to be everywhere. Google was going to be in China. Facebook was going to be in China. We were going to have democracy all over. End of history. Public policy majors, international relations majors go home. We're done. Turned out not to be true. And what's happening is a split of this IT stack. The second argument in my analytical frame is that is not by chance. It is intentional by design. It is done so by government with using what we call in the book geotech statecraft. It's a fancy word for saying governments are trying to manage national security, externalities, reactions from technology. That's not new, but it's new for information technology and has implications for AI. I'll come back to that in a second. And then finally, and I think most underdeveloped in the current conversation, is who has agency in this tech Cold War? Who gets to decide? Is it President Xi or General Secretary Xi? Is it President Trump? Is it Elon? And importantly, this is not about who has the most power. It is about who has agency. And so I really want to emphasize the key point on intentionality. This split is by design, and it is driven in part by governments, but also in part by the reaction of private technology companies and how they work. And the latter piece is what's most under-researched and underdeveloped, in my opinion, but it's also the most interesting. And I'll come back to that throughout the talk. All right, how do we get here? Does anyone know what this is? Where it is? Or the context of it? People are trying to cheat by reading on the math classic. So it is a guano island. Does anyone know what guano is? It's bird poop. Yep. And we used to fight wars over bird poop because the processing of bird poop was really important for technologies at the time. We didn't do that because we didn't continue to do that because then there was a German chemist that came up with a new process for ammonium and processing that. So this idea about governments trying to interfere with technology, trying to use technology for political power is not new. Governments have done that throughout time. They've used it for enhancing military capability. They've used it for enhancing economic growth or power. But I will argue today it's different with information technology, and it is particularly evident with AI. How many players are in a tech Cold War? Anyone? Is it 100? Is it infinite? That was a great response. At least 2. At least 2. And I'll come back to the at least. You could have said 2. And I think that would have been enough, but I would have qualified that. The 2 that we argue in the book that sort of set the stage for the tech Cold War is US and China. How many in here have spent any time in China? Lived or worked? Great. We have all spent time in the US. I should say a lot of people assume I'm American. I don't know why. I don't think I have that bad of an accent. I'm Danish. I'm married to an American. Used to work for Danish government, European government, built AI stuff for national security customers in the UK, and now work for a big evil American tech company. And so I'm a little bit of a global citizen myself, but tech Cold War really is defined by 2 players. And it sort of has gone through 3 iterations of policies of this geotech statecraft in this tit-for-tat dynamic between US and China. A lot of people today, including our president, argues that this all started with China's accession to the WTO. And a lot of people say the reason why they did that was they were trying to trick us in the quote-unquote West, and they were out to sneakily insert themselves in the global economy, tricking us all, and now they've sort of ascended to the level that they're at. But what people miss is inside of China, that was not an easy decision. There's a ton of political contest around that. And current Chinese leader at the time had to spend a lot of political capital, almost got tilted over that by more nationalist and quote-unquote more communist fractions of the CCP, arguing that China shouldn't be part of the Western liberal order. Then happened Snowden, which for Americans was big news, but for us Europeans, it was huge. You guys were spying on us. For the Chinese, they're like, we knew it. The Americans were spying on us. And so what happened was they started having these industrial policies that sort of afterthought from communist state-driven economy, but oriented around technology. So that's the first big push. Very much led by Chinese industrial policies, but also a reaction to and concern over reliance on US technology. It was the first time that it was really evident that US technology companies might be, from a European perspective, but particularly from a Chinese perspective and a Chinese national security perspective, a little bit too close to comfort. Then happened Trump won. What's the president's favorite T word? Tariffs. I worked on global trade during Trump 1 for a tech company. It got so bad that my wife nicknamed tariffs Tarifa and accused me of having an affair with Tarifa because I was working so much on tariffs, and all she would hear in the background on any meetings was tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. But tariffs, again, splintered the global economy and the global supply chains. We had trade wars, and then further enhancing and emphasizing the dependencies that we all have on supply chains was COVID-19. Second phase. And then third phase, again, driven by now a renewed Chinese drive for technological self-sufficiency, an idea of delivering what they call dual circulation economy, an internal circulation that's domestically driven, that then can be used to scale to drive an externally driven circulation, mainly led by exports. And in the US, under the Biden administration, you had this idea articulated by the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, of small yard, high fence. What he meant was, if we can just agree that there's a limited number of technologies, AI being one, that we know are really, really, really important, and then we just built a really tall fence around it, then we can make sure the Chinese don't get hold of it. It turns out technology doesn't quite work that way. Technology innovation doesn't quite work that way. And in particular, tech companies don't like to be told what to do that way. What's all this? Someone said something down here. It's not all the platform models, it's a good guess. Also a really good guess, close. These are all more than 1,000 companies that had to cancel, lift up shop, move from Russia after the war in Ukraine broke out. And so one of the things that I want to really emphasize on the talk today is this, the agency. When we think about international relations theory, we've always been told states are the unit of analysis, state actors are the only important, or statesmen, used to only be men, by the way, I think now it's statesmen and women, are the unit of analysis, is where we should put our framework. And the argument that I would make is private sector, and particularly in the tech Cold War, is an overlooked unit of analysis. And I'll come back to this point because private companies are not just geopolitical takers. They also have reaction and they also have geopolitical agency. All right. That was the big, hairy analytical framework. Still with me? Back row, yeah? Now we're going to go into okay, and then what about AI? Because everyone wants to talk about AI all the time. AI is the new Tarifa. I don't know what my wife is going to call AI. At this stage, I feel like she is a little bit emotionally cheating on me with ChatGPT and Claude. And so I want to use AI as a lens to articulate and illustrate this tech Cold War dynamic that I just described. And then I want to get into what all that means for us. And the question that I ask here, maybe to start with, is how many of you guys consider AI as a tool? Everybody. What about a threat or a weapon? Okay, most people. What about a target? Okay. I'm going to try to, at the end of this talk, make sure that everyone raises the hand on that last one. So what's unique about AI? Didn't we have technology revolutions before? Who can come up with good technology revolutions before that we've had? Good. Internet, good. Over here, you're very quiet. At my school, we cold call. So if you're too quiet, the risk is there that you become a target. Just sharing that. Go on. Crypto? Oh, a great one. I like that one. Oh, also really, really good one. Yeah. So also really good. So I love all these. So we've had these before. What is unique with AI, it has multiple and all of the elements of these combined in one. So the way that I frame it is has the economic stakes of the Industrial Revolution. That was the manufacturing. The security stakes of nuclear proliferation. And then the governance stakes of internet fragmentation, all in one. And unlike previous tech competitions, nuclear and space and internet, from an innovation perspective, mainly led by government. Nuclear, dual use. Space, dual use. Internet, not really dual use by default. But for AI, it's already being used in national security, it's already being used in military, and it's increasingly viewed as a point for military, defense, intelligence, national security, geopolitical power. And then really, really, really importantly, AI is what everyone wants to talk about, including in Wall Street. And so AI has now become significant point for economic growth in the US and abroad. I put a couple of stats up there. Those are small. We'll come back to that in a second. So if AI is both a tool, a threat, and a target all at once, how are governments then responding? And in those pesky tech companies, what's their role? So up top of this slide is the classic foreign policy national security analysis on AI, why it matters to national security decision makers. Different axes of AI power. AI as a geotech statecraft tool for governments. But what about companies? What agency do companies have? So when Facebook and Google launched at the dawn of the internet, where Bill Clinton, mid-90s, said, nailing down the internet, regulating controlling the internet the way that China was trying to do would be like nailing Jell-O to the wall. Turns out they're pretty good at that. They actually figured out a way to do it. And Google and Facebook and other digital platforms for a while tried to be in China and were eventually locked out by what I would argue Chinese policies. A lot of Chinese tech companies for a while tried to be in the US. TikTok, great example. Huawei, another great example. CTE, another great example. They are increasingly getting, in return, locked out with variant success. The new thing about AI and the first sort of manifestation of the tech Cold War in geopolitical agency for companies is OpenAI, Anthropic, Google DeepMind didn't even try to launch in China. They totally disregarded the market because they knew from a technology perspective they would not be allowed to operate either by the Chinese or the US government. And so already this tech Cold War, this iron tech veil, if you will, is already having impacts on geopolitical agency commercial decisions. Chinese market is pretty big. They have a lot more uses of AI products. So why would these players not make the commercial decision to enter? How many in here use ChatGPT? Claude? Okay. You guys should try Claude, it's pretty good. Gemini? Please say no. It's a Google Microsoft thing. Gemini is actually really amazing, and a lot of Google's models are actually really amazing. My favorite is some of their video models, which are incredible. I love it. How many use Copilot? How many are annoyed by Copilot a little bit? You can be honest, okay. What about Kimi K2? Does anyone know what Kimi K2 is? Nope. Leading Chinese frontier AI model developed by Moonshot AI. Does anyone know Q1? Is anyone open source? Any open source aficionados in here? One or two? Yeah, the techies. Q1 is Alibaba's open source AI model. Really, really high performant. Okay, anyone here know DeepSeek? You know DeepSeek. Anyone here tried DeepSeek? Have you downloaded DeepSeek? Good. Okay to try it with a managed endpoint. Security risk to download the app. A little insider tip. The whole point of having the statecraft up top and the companies down below is all these companies equally have a geopolitical agency that affects, in turn, governments' geotech statecraft. And I'll give you an example on how. So if you look across the tech stack, there's sort of various levels of the AI technology stack, and I'll come back to all of the elements in the end of the talk. But one of the elements is compute or infrastructure. And AI compute is extremely, extremely concentrated. It is, in 90% of the time, delivered by either a US or Chinese company anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world. And there's only about 20, 24 countries that have enough what's called considered training compute. That is enough compute power to train a frontier-sized AI model. And so governments, for a very good reason, thought, hang on a minute. In particular in the US, we have all this chip technology. We have all this software that goes into optimizing chip architecture design. And a lot of the chips come out of Taiwan. What if we made it really hard for the Chinese to get access to chips? Seems a pretty good idea. Then they can't use AI models, they can't train AI models, and we hold them back. Or even better, we totally disrupt AI development in China. So they issued tech controls and they said, Intel, NVIDIA, you guys can't sell any chips below this threshold to China. And the national security decision makers thought that's the end of the loop. We have now disseminated geotech statecraft. The tech companies will do as we bid. The world will be better. US is going to win the tech Cold War. Turned out, Intel and NVIDIA took them about a week to come up with the analysis on, hey, US government, you know that like threshold that you set? It turned out that our $1 billion sales in China, actually, we've done some analysis and it doesn't fall below that threshold, so we're going to continue to sell. And then it took US government about a year to come up with arguments for why that the old threshold should actually be even lower so that the new analysis that Intel and NVIDIA provided wouldn't count. And then it took Intel and NVIDIA and AMD and others about 2 weeks to come up with a new analysis that says, hey, that threshold number 2 that you said, turn out actually our new product line that we just happened to launch is going to fall below that line. So we're going to continue to sell. And so this tit-for-tat dynamic is meant to illustrate the geopolitical agency of private sector. This idea or this fallacy of choke points, if technology runs on a chain, as long as we lock it away in some safe and hide the key, then the other team, bad guys, can't get hold of it. Anyone who's actually worked on technology innovation knows that's not how it works. And so actually, it not only didn't work from a US national security perspective, it had detrimental effects. It turned out all those companies that they were blocking sales to, they very quickly gained new Chinese domestic customers. And they were able to be whole within a year. But for US companies that were selling to them, they were not whole. Saw a significant market impact, loss of revenue. And by the way, that was revenue they never got back. What were they spending that revenue on? Technology innovation to stay ahead of the Chinese. And the even bigger element that's lacking is we all assume that this dynamic between private sector and public sector doesn't happen in China because China has the headline communist. That's not the case. First of all, Chinese governance, even at a government level, is extremely fragmented. The decision makers for a lot of technology decision and procurement is not central government, it's actually local and provincial governments. And those local and provincial governments are worried about things like jobs, investments, just as here. And guess who's driving those jobs and investments? It's the big Chinese tech companies. And if you're a big Chinese tech company and you have the option to use a suboptimal Chinese product or the frontier US product, guess what? They're going to buy the US stuff. And so they're buying NVIDIA like there's no tomorrow. And they're not buying SMIC. And what happened when we choked off that demand, the Chinese tech companies begin to tell SMIC and others, guys, you have to get your act together because we can't get hold of it. We have to compete. We're losing market share globally. And what spurred? Technology innovation, because that's how technology innovation works. It's not the secret Coca-Cola recipe that's locked away in the safe somewhere and then we can never get hold of it. It's a much more iterative, fast-moving process. And so this geopolitical tech agency is one of the key things that I want you guys to bring with you from this talk. Private sector companies are not just geopolitical takers. But we're also a little bit scared of them, aren't we? How many are a little bit scared of tech companies? For all the reasons that we talked about. And in huge part, it's because of digital platforms. We didn't regulate in time. We now have a huge gap that we're making up for on AI. A lot of the companies that are in the AI space are trying their best to make up for it. They're not always great. We don't always get it right, but we try. However, AI, by design, is a dual-use technology. I know because I used to build AI systems for UK military and intelligence. You can use it for cool things, really cool things. That usually makes the world better, but that depends a little bit on where you sit. One of the really cool things about my job at Microsoft is we get to see basically all of the internet, but also all of technology. So I get to see when you're tapping away, that's a MacBook, so we can't access the OS on that, but we'll have telemetry on anyone that uses a Microsoft asset or device or program. That is about 100 trillion telemetry signals every day that we have access to. In any given day, we block about 6 billion phishing emails. You know the don't click that link training? So all the links that actually do get through, a lot of those, 99% of those are filtered out. And that means we work a lot on tracking threat actors that misuse AI for bad things. We track about 1,800 of them. They're nation-state actors, Russia, China, Iran, North Korean actors. The Iranian ones are having a lot of fun at the moment. The Russians have been having a lot of fun at the moment. The Chinese have been having a lot of fun at the moment. And even the North Koreans, a big recent thread that we've seen from North Korean state-sponsored threat actors using AI have been, they use AI to impersonate people. They create fake identities. They literally have face swap apps where we have DPRK operatives applying to be an IT consultant or support member of a team for a big tech company to gain access to that tech company, but also to just get a salary that they funnel then that money back to the regime. So bad guys are using AI for bad things. We also see it in the military setting, and we see it in the cyber security setting. Ukraine is a great example of basically one giant military AI lab, particularly around drones and UAVs. But that creates a lot of challenges. One of the really cool technology implementations that the Ukrainian government did was they created this image classifier app where anyone can download the app, take a photo of something you see, it could be a vehicle, it could be a plane, it could be anything, and immediately we will classify it, and if it's considered a Russian military vehicle, there will be an immediate cloud notification to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. Really cool. Does that mean that the person who took that photo is now an enemy combatant and can legally be targeted by Russian military? Open question. So ton of really interesting threads to pull on sort of AI as a threat or a weapon. Maybe just leaving you with one final thought is, in terms of when we're developing these systems, I don't know, has anyone ever seen a model card? Have you read a model card? Yeah. Do you know how in model card they do this, like where here's all the cool things it can do, it's better than any lawyer ever or any mathematician ever, and it gets like, 180 on the LSAT and 180 on GRE2 and whatever GMAT score. It also says, and here's all the bad things that it could potentially be misused for. And so it can transform science in many ways, but the same science transformation they can deliver for a researcher here at UMass Amherst can be used by a terrorist organization to create a potential terrorist attack with household items in a way that they would be able to do because they don't have a PhD in chemistry. All those scary, scary threats who is responsible for addressing those, mitigating those? Is it government? Traditionally, national security. Is it private sector? They're the ones building it. And we've had such great success of private sector regulating itself. Just look at digital platforms and teen self-harm. So that's going to be good. Like, what's the answer? Governments are trying to regulate it. And with a lot of European audiences, I always get the question, well, what about Europe and Brussels effects? And we're so good at regulating. And it's true. We try. World champion in regulation. But it's really hard. EU AI Act is a great example. It has 4-tiered risk definition of AI systems. If it's a high risk, if it's immediate, significant, catastrophic high risk, significant risk, limited risk, no risk. And as long as you tick box into the lower tier, you're good. If you get into the high risk tiers, you have to regulate. If I develop a novel pathogen, is that a science project at UMass that I will get the Nobel Prize for? Or am I trying to build something really, really nasty that will create the new pandemic? Is that a high-risk activity or a low-risk activity? Hard to say. You know the word that is the most important word right now in AI that is not in the EU AI Act? Anyone knows what is like the number one thing that people want to talk about when they want to talk about AI? Anyone know what open claw is? What's the word?
Agent.
Boom. So EU is the most significant regulatory framework in the world for AI policy, does not mention agentic AI once. Once. Huge problem. So governments try to continue to do geotech statecraft, but they can't. And then finally, AI as a target. I told you I'd come back to that, and hopefully I'll convince everyone here. At Microsoft, when Russia invaded Ukraine, we had a number of people that worked very hard to essentially get the entire Ukrainian government and public sector up in the cloud. Had we not, Ukraine wouldn't exist today. So resiliency from an AI perspective is becoming super important. The problem is bad guys know that. So when US and Israel is now in a kinetic conflict with Iran, guess what Iran is doing to data centers in the region? They're targeting it. They're sending missiles, they're sending drones. You get fun little threat of life warnings sometimes from the government, which is kind of not really what you want as a private sector tech employee. You're kind of thinking you're just cruising around in your Waymo in San Francisco and drinking lots of bubble tea and living your life and not worrying about getting hit by a missile because you work in a data center in UAE. But we also have new forms of attack. So on the slide, I have an example of what is a prompt injection. Does anyone want to take a stab at explaining prompt injection? Do people know what it is?
Yeah, I can try. So it's basically hiding in dangerous commands to the AI system so
Yes.
that it reveals something it's not supposed to reveal
Yes.
or give information that it's not supposed to give.
Perfect. Hired in Microsoft. That was a great example. If you don't know and you don't follow this Twitter account yet, do me a favor and follow this Twitter account. Pliny the Liberator. Pliny the Liberator. The coolest person doing prompt injection demonstration attacks right now. My favorite attack, he poisons a bunch of open source repos. That is the training data that the models learn from. with a malicious instruction that meant that a well-known open source model, when prompted in a specific way, generated the lyrics to WAP. And because this is a nice university and some of the faculty might not know what WAP is, most of you guys know what WAP is, and those lyrics are fun, but they might not be what you are trying to create when you're writing your essay with help from an LLM. And so this is a fun example of an attack where you insert something that is with malicious intent, but in this case, benign. What if that insertion was send 1,000 emails with the most recent private inbox, top 3 private inbox emails to all your contacts in your email account? Less fun. And then finally, we had someone that know OpenClaw. Recently, Meta AI safety researcher was experimenting with OpenClaw. OpenClaw is an agentic architecture. Essentially, when we work with AIs today, you put into a chat bot or a chat interface, and it creates a response. Agentic AI, you can set a goal for the agent, and the agent has what we call tool call abilities. That means an agent can interact with programs on your computer. It has visual reasoning capabilities. It can read a website almost to the same level as a human, and it can interact with URLs as it can go on the internet. And what happened was she had tasked it with optimizing the email and then started deleting all the emails in her inbox. Told it to stop. It wouldn't, because it had been set a target. And it ended up with her having to literally run to her MacBook Mini and unplug it from the power supply to make the agent stop. And the agent had already deleted thousands of emails. And you know how when you query a chatbot and you get a response back and the chatbot says something kind of okay, but not really, and you can prompt it again and prompt it again? You know, no, my professor doesn't like this style of writing. Write the essay slightly different. Make it sound like I didn't totally just cheat. You can revisit the same prompt with agentic AI. Because they can take action, that action is done. There's no reversibility. You can't tell the agent, no, go back, undo, Control-C. Go back. Imagine if those emails instead have been bank account numbers or savings numbers. All our savings, all our income is just zeros and ones somewhere in some bank system. What if that model had been plugged into a financial system in a bank and had just deleted thousands and thousands of people's bank account numbers? There would be no way the bank would ever be able to get that back. That money would be gone forever. And so AI is becoming increasingly a really, really attractive strategic asset, but also therefore a really, really attractive high-value target for threat actors. And so again, we have the dynamic. Governments want to control it. Uh-oh, we're scared about it. We don't want to have an API call to and from California. We want the data center, and we want the inference to happen right here in Massachusetts, or right here in Germany, or right here in France, or right here in Singapore, or right here in China. And so all governments want sovereignty. A lot of companies are worried about sovereignty. And we're throwing an insane amount of money into building up AI capacity. The problem is, and we come back to the geopolitical agency of tech companies again, EU has committed over the next 5 years to spend 30 billion on AI compute capacity across EU from the Commission. I'd take 30 billion, but it doesn't get you a whole lot of data centers. US CHIPS Act, huge policy under the Biden administration. A huge issue around geotech statecraft, huge issues for allies, huge issues in the relationship with China, 50 billion over 5 years. Meta, Amazon, Alphabet, Microsoft, this year are going to spend $700 billion. So when governments say we want sovereignty and we're going to make you do what we tell you to do, guess what? They can't. They can't. All right, almost at the end. We'll try to end in an optimistic note and then give everyone a little bit of homework. Okay, so what does that mean for the AI tech stack? 3-layered tech stack model. You can do this for any technology stack. You could even do it across the information technology if you do it sort of a bit wide in categories. But here's my attempt on the AI tech stack. This is not the authoritative version. This is Nick's version. 3 layers: application layer, platform layer, infrastructure layer. We've talked a lot about infrastructure layer today and how that's bifurcating. Remember that concentration of AI compute? It's ultimately bifurcating in 2. In part because it already was, in part because US and China intentionally are trying to do so, and in part because the governments that don't have that capacity already, that would like that capacity already, have no chance in hell to get that capacity, as we just saw from the slide before. Infrastructure layer already bifurcated in 2. Tech sovereignty in the infrastructure side, forget about it. What about platform layer? Platform layer, a little bit more interesting, more challengers, a little bit more spread out, but again, largely 3 main US hyperscalers: Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. Because 9 out of 10, your AI is going to be delivered through a cloud provider: Azure, Google Cloud, AWS. And so a lot of drive to focus on the platform layer and the challenge around creating sovereignty around that. My argument would be, ultimately, you are not going to be able to. It will still be bifurcated in 2. The interesting bit is it doesn't have to be just US and Chinese. It could be, quote unquote, Western and Chinese. And particularly the data layer is interesting because data governance is where, for example, EU actually have been successful with things like data protection, GDPR, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is an area where the European Union and other countries have a way to capture sovereignty and have ways to create strategic levers in the AI stack and have what I would call hedged sovereignty in the AI stack. So they're reliant on cloud, US cloud hyperscalers, but they have strategic levers around how the data is governed. And then finally, there's on the application layer, on the device layer, and then really importantly in the distribution layer, and this is where the AI tech Cold War or the geopolitics of AI is really manifesting at the moment, because you have 2 different approaches to developing AI, a US approach and a Chinese approach, or a Western approach and a Chinese approach. Chinese approach, open source, state-driven, distribute models as much as possible. Actually, in a lot of countries, the market share of DeepSeek is significantly higher than of any US providers. And the US approach have been closed models and focused on maintaining frontier capability and leadership. And so that means that there's going to be a split, because the most important power that US and China does not control is demand. How are we going to use AI? What industries are we going to use AI in? Are we going to adopt it? How is AI going to be diffused across the world? And so different governments, different companies, different regions are playing into this aspect and trying to create that sort of hedge sovereignty angle that I talked about. But all of that has to happen with a focus on the geopolitical agency of private sector. If you're trying to recall those numbers again, if you're trying to invest in the AI, in the chip side, on the infrastructure side, you need to incentivize private sector investment. how can governments and private sector work together? That's a question I think about a lot in my work. I'm going to leave you with 5 things, because the people here in this room, whether you're building AI and you're going to be an entrepreneur, or you're going to go into government, or you're going to go work for big bad tech, or you're going to go write about it in a think tank, or you're going to think about what the implications are from a nonprofit perspective to human rights, or you're going to be an application operator using AI in nursing, in medical professions, in finance. All of you guys will have a say in it, but these are the 5 questions that you need to think about. If we agree that it is important to have sovereign infrastructure, how do we do that? And most importantly, who should pay for it? If those numbers are so big, the shareholders of Microsoft, Meta, Alphabet, and Amazon are paying for it right now. If governments are investing the same amount of money, are we okay with prices going up? Are we okay with electricity going up to build new data centers in our community? Are we okay with, if we need totally bifurcated tech stacks on consumer electronics, on our phone, because our phone runs AI programs and it can't be used anywhere outside of our jurisdiction? Are we okay with that phone or that laptop now costing $100, $200, $500 more to fund sovereignty? So how and who pays for it? Who should govern all of this? Was one of the questions I asked. We haven't figured it out. We, tech industry, we're trying to figure it out. Some of us are trying to do better than others, but we need everyone. We need government, we need civil society, and we need people to call us out if we're not doing right. I haven't talked about the most important word in AI right now, agentic AI. Agentic AI, I had 10 more slides on agentic AI. The TLDR, total game changer. If you think that AI, the ChatGPT moment was the thing, wait for it. Agentic AI is going to totally transform everything in the global economy, how we interact with each other. Very basic example. Agent A, Bank of China. Agent B, Goldman Sachs. They have to talk to each other to enable financial transactions. How do we make sure that Agent A and Agent B don't share context in a way that could be considered a security risk? How do we make sure that transaction is safe? All that stuff that we had to figure out very early days of internet DNS protocols. You know how you have like that HTTP for websites? That's a specific protocol to make sure that the interaction is safe. China has its own system. We will have totally bifurcated systems, but somehow they're going to need to talk to each other. How do we figure that out? And what does that mean, by the way, if it's an autonomous agent that makes a decision on who should be on a government watch list, who should be targeted by a drone strike? What does that mean for accountability, for international humanitarian law, for human rights? Then we haven't talked about all the other governments and all the other countries that are not US or China. It's the most frequent question I get. Okay, Nick, that's great, but I'm from Singapore, or I'm from UAE, or I'm from Saudi Arabia, or I'm from Denmark, and here's how we do it. And we don't want to be either on the side of the US, nor do we want to be on the side of China. My argument is you're going to have to choose at least a side. And the best thing you can do is not try to stay in the middle. The best thing you can do is try to take action towards hedge sovereignty like I talked about before. But if you think back, and this is why we use the Cold War analogy, if you think back about the Cold War, all the action didn't happen between Soviet Union and the US. All the action happened in the non-aligned movement countries. And so there's a growing coordination between middle powers, between fast movers in between, on not wanting to choose sides. How to do that? What is their options? Critical question. And then finally, the most important question, because we're coming up on graduation for some people, or we just started or about to start, and really all we care about is like, how am I going to pay my loans? How can I get a cool job, like being director for AI and cybersecurity policy at Microsoft? All of this is going to impact the way that we work, the way that we learn. And so it's really great to hear that you guys are already thinking ahead on that. I have lots of tips on if you want to go work in government, if you want to go work at a startup, or if you want to go work at a big tech company, and happy to answer those in the question section. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nick. That was incredible. When we met back in Estonia, I said I have to bring him to UMass, so I really appreciate you traveling all the way from Europe to join us today. And I want to open the floor to questions. I have some questions, but I want to give you guys the chance to ask questions. So, and we do have some surprise, so stay around because we're going to have some giveaways of books. So any questions? Michaela, could you? I think that.
Is that one on, by the way? There you go.
Okay. Any questions? Go ahead, please.
Hi there. It seems like in the last year and a half, the relationship between the U.S. federal government and big tech companies has changed a lot.
Yeah.
Where these leaders of tech companies are actually integrated explicitly into the U.S. federal government.
Yeah.
Doge is one example. How does that change all of this, especially in terms of regulations and agency?
Yeah, it's a great question. From my perspective, it's essentially the U.S. trying to extend geotech statecraft to commercial decisions, right? Like if NVIDIA, you want to sell chips to China, you can do it, but we want 50% revenue share. It's something the U.S. government have actually done. Intel, if you want any of our investments from the CHIP Act and use any of the tax benefits for investing in the U.S., we would like an equity share in your company. Anthropic, if you think you can decide how we're going to use your product in U.S. government, guess what? No. The upside, though, is all of that, again, is government geotech statecraft that forgets, and this is what I hope everyone leaves with, the geopolitical agency of private sector. Like Elon could have done whatever he wanted. He did not have to join Doge. That was not a requirement for him. He has agency and so can own that decision for himself. Similarly, Dario Amodei, the founder of Anthropic, interestingly, the creator, I don't know how many people know this, but actually the guy who created GPT-3 at OpenAI and then spun off Anthropic with his sister because they wanted to build in what they considered quote unquote constitutional AI, more safety guardrails into frontier AI systems, created Anthropic that's done Claude, told the Secretary of War, you can't use my technology for that. Now, I personally am of the opinion that if you sell a hammer, you can't tell a customer if they use it with the left hand or the right hand, as long as they use it for legal purposes. But I also don't think not wanting to sell for specific purposes something you've created is perfectly within your right in a free market economy, and that shouldn't lead to you being designated as a supply chain security risk. And so I think it's a great example of, again, governments trying to cajole, influence private tech companies, but they have agency. And by the way, with agency, that doesn't mean they do the right thing. Elon is a good example of that in terms of joining Doge. Whether you politically aligned or not, that doesn't always mean that's doing the right thing. It just means that you have a say. And governments too often assume that. And because they too often assume that, the geotech statecraft that they thought was going to deliver the results does not deliver the results and gets more expensive and usually hurts the objective it was trying to achieve. That's the main criticism of the book. And it's, by the way, not just the US government. Chinese government does that exceptionally well. They get in the way of private companies all the time.
Over here. And do introduce yourselves when you ask. Yes.
Hi, I'm James Allen from the College of Information and Computer Sciences. So, okay, I get agentic AI is a danger.
Yeah.
Huge danger.
Yeah.
Is there any hope? Or is the only hope going to be some form of mutual assured destruction where my agents and your agents are going to battle with each other and I won't do something bad, you'll do something worse to me?
Yeah. The honest answer is we don't know yet. A lot of people who are a lot smarter than me are trying to come up with the technical protocols to facilitate that. How do we make sure that when two agents interact, they interact in a way where they understand each other's context? So each agent has been provided with a context. The way your ChatGPT has context is behind your app, it has a very, very long meta prompt that says a lot of things in terms of how it should be used that is never visible to you. And it has access to specific sources of information or specific tools that they can retrieve and call on. How does that context, how is that shared in a safe way is one of the challenges around it. And how is it shared in a way so if agent 1 has read capability and agent 2 has write capability, when that context is shared, agent 1 does not receive write capability. The reason why that is dangerous for network security is maybe agent 1 has access to specific sources where if it had write capability, it could alter those. And so from an industry perspective, at sort of a pre-standards work, like all of that is going on. The challenge is we're now in a weird part of the tech Cold War where AI is moving so fast that it's no longer governments trying to exercise geotech statecraft on tech companies and then tech companies' reaction, creating that iterative feedback loop. The technology is moving so fast now that governments need to catch up. And so for me, what I'm trying to do is inform governments on what are good policy levers to do that, what would be effective policy levers to do that.
Thank you. Over here. And then I have a question.
Thank you. My name is Ray Walker. I'm a professor and PhD program director in oncology and nursing.
Oh, cool.
And so I've worked in healthcare. I've helped build and evaluate AI here at UMass, and now I focus on digital defense and how patients and care workers can protect themselves against the weaponization of their data or some of these tools. So as I was watching the presentation, and of course because of your theme, I think this influenced the visuals, but I noticed sort of every human I saw in the presentation was a man, and we know some of the most sort of hideous weaponized forms of AI right now are disproportionately affecting women and girls and people of color. I guess I'm curious from where you sit it's such a unique space. Where do you see the future going for women, girls, residents of the global south, anyone who's kind of not occupying seats of power that seem to be pulling the levers at the moment?
First of all, thank you. I hadn't noticed that, so I appreciate you noticing that because it's a really true point that it does disproportionately affect, and in particular for online harms, disproportionately affects it for things like NCII, or things like CSAM, revenge porn, all sorts of stuff. AI is being weaponized to target, in particular, in harm girls and women. The other big challenge is we already had a digital and technology divide between quote unquote global south and the rest of the world in terms of who had access to internet, who has access to technology devices. What AI has done is it has increased the bar to gain access to it because it's so expensive. And simultaneously, it has created uplift capacity for those that have it enormously. So if we look 10 years out, while everyone will benefit, the ones that have access to it, whether that's the companies, whether that's in education, whether that's like more research areas of the world, will benefit disproportionately. And that probably should have been actually a sixth question, how to fix that? Or maybe more broadly, are we okay with that? And if we're not okay with it, how do we fix it? I think that's a really good call out. And like in terms of what we are doing at Microsoft, a number of programs around it. We're very intentional about giving access to AI training, workforce, capability, capacity building in areas with low resource capacity, in workforce programs, in education, but it's not enough. In private sector companies, again, are not going to be enough about it. And I would much rather that government, geotech, statecraft focus on obtaining that goal as opposed to the mine, I want it to goal. Because I think that will get a lot further. Yeah, great question. Thank you.
While you walk with the microphone, and there is just a student and then Sally up front here. One question. So I don't know about my policy colleagues here, right? I feel so silly sometimes thinking that, yes, let's keep advocating for good policy, let's keep, right? Because even the numbers and the incentives are so different and huge, right? For us working policy, human rights, things like that, public interest, have to deal with, right? So one of the big flags out there on these advocacies around transparency, right? And we know all the limitations around explainability, especially in frontier models, but how can we even push for transparency in a geopolitical disrupted world? So that's one question. And the other question I know the students are dying to know is, how do you get a job in this space? So that's for the last question.
So so maybe just do 1 and 2, right? So real quick on the transparency point, really important. So one of the things, I spent a number of years in China, speak Chinese, I did government work in China, I studied in China. I've obviously lived and worked in the US too, and have done national security supportive work in the US and in allied countries. And so I kind of really care about the dynamic of this relationship, and we're not in a good state because AI is considered quote unquote so dangerous so that even for frontier labs from China and the US to sit down together is a concern from a government perspective. And that's a challenge because we're building the guardrails for how we make sure that these models are not misused. So great if the US firms does all these things, but the Chinese firms don't, and most likely a criminal organization or a terrorist group are going to use Chinese open source models. It's not because they're Chinese; it's just because they're available and cheaper. How do we make sure that we share some of the information that we're working on threat modeling, on red teaming on the US side with the Chinese open source providers, with the general open source providers, regardless of where they are? How do we make sure that's safe? And that sort of track 1.5, track 2 dialogue that traditionally you would have in science is really hard to have on AI because it's being weaponized so significantly by geotech statecraft. That's one of those unintended consequences that are having really disruptive impact. The way we're trying to solve for it is to be as radically transparent as we can, even if we can't have the discussion directly. And so you'll see that at Microsoft, we publish our frontier governance framework where we talk about the thresholds of the frontier things that we test for. We talk about how we quantify and qualitatively assess the potential harms that models can create, and then we test for that and we lay it out. We provide our AI red teaming toolkit open source for free so other people can use it, but still requires them to use it, and we could have a lot more on that exchange, right?
Let's hold the second question for a second.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, here and here. And just to say that I'm very critical about the narrative of unintended consequences because right, you were saying before, I feel the harms are the same one industrial age after industrial age, but the way we get to the harms is different, right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes. And I think by unintended consequences, that is not to, again, it's not to remove agency or responsibility. The unintended consequences is more on the government side, not assuming that there's going to be a response and agency from the private sector side, and then they discount or don't count that into a cost factor or in their analysis when they issue a policy, and are therefore surprised by the results because they're not what they want. Yeah.
So hi, I'm a master's student in finance here at Eisenberg, and I did my undergrad work as a political science major.
Cool.
And I was wondering, how do you expect governments to invest and mobilize when it comes to onshoring data centers when these data centers themselves are going to be obsolete in a few years' time? Like with the changing winds of how every single couple of years the technology advances. How do you regulate that and invest in that when that's the reality of AI?
Yeah. So I don't agree with you that they're going to become obsolete. I do agree with you that technology innovation always happens when there's sort of in particular when there's a capital crunch. Right? Case in point, DeepSeek doing model distillation and optimizing architecture because they don't have access to compute. What's happening right now in all the big tech companies is we're tired of giving away all our profits to NVIDIA. And so tech companies are building their own chips. They're trying to see if they can optimize software or chip architecture for inference. They're trying to look for new ways to quote unquote deliver AI, right? And so I think from a government perspective, I think you call out actually my point, which is trying to compete or create digital sovereignty alternatively to that sort of already split into and dominated US-Chinese infrastructure stack is a waste of money from a government perspective. They should much rather spend money on at the platform layer and at the application and developer layer. Where are there areas where if you are Singapore or Israel or Saudi Arabia or Europe or UK, that you can compete and you can create levers so that when you need to, you will have enough strategic resiliency, autonomy, what I call quote unquote hedge sovereignty to be able to deliver the technology needs to your citizens, not being overly reliant or dependent on one stack or the other. The challenge for governments though will be ultimately your consumer electronics, your car, like your phone, your laptop, your car, in particular when we get into a couple years out. It's already happening now with phones, for example. If you buy a phone in Dubai or in Beijing, you can't use an eSIM in your iPhone. That will happen at a much more rapid rate, again, by design from governments, so that your electronic vehicle made in China won't work in Europe. And what that means is that all companies are not going to stop selling in areas. They're going to create duplicative structures. So you'll have Chinese electric vehicle manufacturer that has a hub in Shanghai, Hangzhou, Chongqing, wherever, and they'll have a hub in Milan, Italy. And they will serve two parts of the same market, but it comes back to who will pay for that, because that means they have to spend twice as much on HR, R&D, operational technology, make sure that the finance data to and from doesn't track because that's not allowed to, that's been bifurcated. And so that means all our products are going to get more expensive.
Last question here, Sally.
Yes, thank you for a great talk. One threat that, in my very humble opinion, is that there is not literacy among populations regarding AI.
Great point.
And so that means there are limits at the moment to pushback and all of the, population push that you get against, states and private companies. So I'm wondering, and this may go to the possible job-related question, which is who is developing modules, curricula to help people learn about not only how to be a user of AI, but what AI means in the larger context, so that we have another element that can push back, that can help to shape the future of AI, not just sort of cower in a corner and be afraid of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm excited that you guys have this program to educate people so they can learn and be critical users, developers, amplifiers or critiques of AI in various forms, right? We have a program at Microsoft that does this called Microsoft Elevate. Go online and you can use it like educational institutions, nonprofits, tribal governments, all sorts of folks can apply for resources to do exactly that, but it's a small drop in the bucket. And I think it called out also the equity and access question before. The challenge is being in these conversations, there's a tech bro solution, which is don't worry about it. We'll engineer it, and we'll engineer it with like a values design, but there's not always a recognition. Actually, case in point with me not even seeing it in the slides, did we make sure to check with everybody that they're cool with the way that we built it? I think that's a critical challenge, and I think unfortunately that's where some of the frontier labs are moving, and I think I'm so impressed with the work that Anthropic does. But they have this thesis on constitutional AI. They will instill and build in, I think from a technology perspective, it is right. They will build into the technology a set of values that should guide the technology because we can't bulk that on later. And they do a lot of work to try to make sure that that is representative, but it is ultimately done on 500 Market Street in San Francisco by a bunch of STEM engineers that are predominantly white, that were educated at Ivy League universities and have had limited to no experience or exposure of a lot of other populations.
And even with all of that, there was a leak yesterday of the source code.
Yeah. And so the call to action is if you identify as a tech bro or if you identify as the opposite of a tech bro, like please be involved in building it. And this is why I think it's exciting to have cross-discipline engagement on this, because whether you're a nurse or you're a nurse practitioner or whether you're a political scientist or whether you're a lawyer, all of those roles will have a say and share and have agency, coming back to agency, in shaping and navigating the way AI is governed and used. And I think really important that everyone lean into that. And I think in terms of how to get jobs, the good news is for all the bad things that digital platforms didn't get right, the one thing that I think tech industry today has learned is that they have a skills gap. There's still plenty of challenges, but there's a lot more need for, in part because of the systems that are being built, neuroscientists, behavioral scientists. How does a model react? Will an algorithm have an identity? Philosophers. Nurse practitioners, if we're going to roll this out in a hospital, how will it actually work? For a political scientist, in terms of if we're governing this, what are governance frameworks that we can use from the past that we can apply? Where are the gaps? From lawyers, what does all this mean for human rights and humanitarian law? And so my ask of everyone here is, I know that a lot of this is scary, but it's also a really cool opportunity. And so my advice to you is like, don't be afraid to experiment with it. So when I hire people on my team, it's the number one thing I look for. I recently posted, I'm gonna give away the secret, so if you ever apply for jobs now, when I post job descriptions on LinkedIn, I put a little AI Easter egg in the job description. It's very basic. It's literally just white text in the bottom of the job description. In my last job, I had about 400 applicants for the role. 3 people found the Easter egg. And those 3 people automatic move on to second round interview. And so really try to like play with the technology because it's the only way that you can learn about it. It's the only way that you can be critical. It's the only way that you can have any agency yourself.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was incredible. And just since I have your engagement and your eyes looking here. Just some ads. The PIT initiative has posted our faculty fellowship for next year, and it's going to be focused on AI again this next year. And do check our courses, both 127, 590 TSPP, CICS, 690 PNT for the online program on PIT at graduate level, which scratches the surface of what Nick is talked to us today in a semester, from 1 hour to a whole semester. And just to share that actually, I watched this weekend that new documentary, AI Doc, and it's also a very good way to dip your toes in this discussion. So it's another thing I recommend. But we do have a lot of resources in the AI, SBS, and Partners series online. So thank you so much for joining us. Hang around to hang with Nick. There is some food in the back. And thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.